Welcome to Bernalillo. It's always great to have the Democrats here. Certainly miss the food at the range, but we're happy that you're here. What a beautiful day. Look at that beautiful view. Is there a better one anywhere? Isaac, is there a better one?
Not that I know of.
No, this is it.
I just want to say that I appreciate the party. The results of the CD1 election were fantastic. I know a lot of people here have a lot to do with that. Give yourselves a round of applause. And it's just a good time to be alive. It's a good time to be a Democrat. It's a good time to be a resident of Bernalillo. Again, thank you for being here, and I'll let you all be the first to know that my term ends in March of next year, and I've decided to run for re-election. So
4 more years! 4 more years! 4 more years!
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for being here. Sandoval County. Before I kind of get into what the PRC does and inform you of some of the things that we're doing, and I'm sure you're aware of a few that are going to come before this commission, but I just wanted to express my heartfelt thanks for the support that Sandoval County gave to me, not just in the primary, but the general elections, and I won't forget it. So thank you for that, Sandoval County. So I represent District 3, which really encompasses all of north central New Mexico. And it doesn't include all of Sandoval County, but just to give you an idea, in terms of apportionment, each PRC district represents about 410,000 people, which is about 2/3 the size of a congressional district. So these are very large districts. There's 5 geographical districts. As you know, there was a ballot question on the November election, and it passed with a slim majority. And what that ballot question will do is it'll change the PRC from an elected to an appointed position. It's going to reduce the size of the commission from 5 members down to 3. So there will be a 3-member appointed commission beginning on January 1st of 2023. Now, what that ballot question didn't tell you is that it's going to increase the term from 4 to 6 years. It stripped the PRC authority from the state constitution, and now the authority of the PRC rests entirely with the state legislature. And so there was a lot of, they say the devil's in the details, and certainly it was in that ballot question. And these appointees will be vetted by a commission next fall, and they'll be subject, and the governor will make a selection subject to Senate confirmation. So there's going to be some big changes. So we're in transition, not only from an elected commission to an appointed commission, but as you know, the governor evicted the Public Regulation Commission last year from the state PERA building. And so we've been without an office for many, many months now. So 100% of the employees are teleworking. And we are about to move into a new office location near the Santa Fe Plaza. But it's only going to house about, I'd say 40–45% of the staff. So when you talk about change and transition, there's quite a bit going on in the PRC. In terms of the function of the PRC, and I'm sure many of you are very informed about the PRC, but what it does is it regulates utilities, it regulates intrastate motor carriers, pipeline safety, fire safety, and telecommunications, but it doesn't regulate interstate telecommunication providers, only interlocal providers. And so it's strictly within the state. The state legislature passed a bill about a year ago that requires the transfer of the fire marshal's office out of the PRC. So effective July 1, the PRC will no longer include the state fire marshals. I believe it's going to be transferred to Homeland Security. So there's even more changes. I think the ultimate desire of the legislature is to have the PRC only engage in utility regulation, so there could be some legislative bills that would basically transfer the authority of all non-utility regulation functions out of the PRC. But right now we're not going to keep the seats warm. We're really very, very busy. We have a lot of things going on. Just to give you an idea of what we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 months, there's been a history, right, with the PRC among the commissioners, but we're changing that. I think right now we have a much more professional, collegial commission. No more fighting on the public record. What we did too is we sponsored changes to our operational protocol as a means to really build a strong firewall between commission politics and staff. When that happens, the system breaks down. And so we did that as a means to stabilize the agency and professionalize it. The pandemic has really had an impact on New Mexicans, particularly those that are less fortunate. And so what we've seen is people have been unable to pay their utility bills. And as of about a month ago, the collective debt in arrearages by all regulated utilities, these are investor-owned utilities and electric co-ops, is at $53 million. $53 million in debt. And so what we've been doing is we carry a mandate or a charter of public interest. But public interest doesn't just mean advocating for you as ratepayers. We are mandated by statute to balance the interests of those utilities, their investors, and all of you as ratepayers. And so I'd love to be a 100% public advocate, but we can't. And we're prohibited by statute. But in the case of individuals that can't pay their bills, we stepped in and we issued an order mandating a moratorium on utility disconnections. The only authority that the PRC has rests with the governor's public health orders. And as of May 21st, she generally extends them for a short period of time, but that's the only authority that we have. But the utilities have told us, PRC, you're standing between ratepayers and us. We want to be able to work with them, customize repayment plans, and that's the last thing we want to do is disconnect them. So we balanced their feedback, and so what we did is we established these transition periods where the co-ops, the co-ops are less likely to carry a lot of debt from arrearages because they're not investor-owned, right? And so we allowed co-ops to begin working with customers. In other words, we lifted the moratorium on disconnections, I think on May 1st. And so we're working with them. The moratorium on disconnections for investor-owned utilities like PNM and El Paso Electric, that moratorium is still in place and it will expire on August 15th. And so it's been very difficult, I hate to say it, but the feedback that we're getting now, particularly from the co-ops, is that, they tell me, Commissioner, when we send a disconnect notice, they pay, they're prompt. But during the moratorium, just like anything, right, they probably have to make a decision between buying groceries and paying their utility bills. And so we've been working to transition out of this pandemic and help those that have incredible arrearages, but help is on the way. There's some significant federal assistance that's available. It's a combined amount over $200 million, I'd say about $215 million for rental assistance and for utility assistance. But the problem is there's a lot of federal red tape and it's getting in the way of these ratepayers that are experiencing heavy arrearages and difficulties to access this money. And so I think it's called Rent Help NM, renthelpnm.org. They have an online application. If you know of any renters that are distressed and severely impacted by the pandemic, there is relief there, not just for rental assistance, but for utility assistance. And we've also sent a letter to the Biden administration and the Treasury Department asking them to relax some of the rules and the red tape, because the rate at which this money is being allocated, it's just not going to happen. The deadline to obligate 160 million of the 200 billion plus is September 30th. And if we can't use it as a state, it gets redistributed to other states. And so this is a serious issue that we're dealing with. I hosted a workshop to talk to all the co-ops and find out how they're going. We get reports on the debt and how they're managing disconnection. So you'll be hearing more about this, but hopefully we can really streamline the process in getting a lot of this federal assistance out the door to help people in distress and prevent them from being disconnected. Some of the priorities that I've been working on is the legislature passed a Community Solar Act rule that's going to allow for more affordable, accessibility of solar. But there are some parameters. The overall cap is 200 megawatts, and there's a 30% set aside for low to moderate income communities. We've just kicked off the rulemaking. The way the PRC works is we typically like to implement a statute through rules. And it's much easier, but the rulemaking process is very robust. We have to hear from all the parties and the utilities. But I've got good news. We have hired a national consultant. We've opened the docket on community solar, and you'll be hearing a lot more about that. Now, community solar is, in terms of the statute, only applies to the investor-owned utilities. And if you look at the service areas of the investor-owned utilities in a map of the state, it's kind of a Swiss cheese approach. And so the rural electric co-ops, they can opt in if they'd like. So the Community Solar Act statute only applies to the investor-owned utilities. And so we're just at the front end of the rulemaking. It's going to be very complex, so you'll be hearing more about that. One of my other priorities is the state legislature passed a Transportation Electrification Act. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so what this statute calls for, and it only applies to the investor-owned utilities, is each investor-owned utility has to submit a plan. I think within a year of the actual statute. And we're going to work on the rule for that. We don't have a rule, so that we're going just on the statute. But what you're going to be seeing when these plans are approved is, can you raise your hand? Who has an electric vehicle right now? Electric vehicle. Okay, we have hybrid? Yeah, hybrid. Okay. Some of these plans are different. You know, PNM has a different plan than El Paso Electric. The other investor-owned utilities is Southwestern Public Service or Xcel Energy. They have different plans, but what you'll see that's common across all the plans is rebates to buy chargers, residential chargers. There's funding available, incentives to build public, quick chargers that's more convenient along primary highway corridors. And there's even some incentives for public transit in cities that service low to moderate income communities. So I would say transportation electrification is going to be implemented here real soon. You'll be hearing more about it. The investor-owned utilities are already doing a lot of marketing associated with that. So that's very exciting. In terms of the Public Regulation Commission, we're just like any agency. We have a budget, and it really impacts how we operate. But the state legislatures have been very active in passing bills that affect the Public Regulation Commission. But yet there's no proportional increases or no appropriations to pay for these legislative mandates. And so right now I can tell you that the Public Regulation Commission is vastly underfunded. And it really does, kind of compromise on overall staff resources. We regulate an industry that's becoming ever more complex, and we need to keep up with this changing industry. So if you know any legislators, please tell them to fully fund the Public Regulation Commission, because we are representing you. We're supposed to, our charter is the public interest, and we can't do that without adequate budget. In our effort to stabilize the agency, we hired a new chief of staff. You know, you've heard all these stories of interim chiefs of staff, but we finally have done that. Wayne Probst is his name. He was the executive director of the Public Employee Retirement Association. Prior to that, he was head of the New Mexico, I think, Retiree Authority. Yeah, I believe so. So he's one of the most seasoned executives, and we're really happy that he's leading the way there. One last thing that I'm really big on is, raise your hand if you've ever tuned into a PRC meeting. Raise your hand. Okay, if you remember prior to January 1, there's just people talking. There's like, you're looking at a blank screen. And in my first meeting, I'm wondering, well, how can people follow along? And so now we're posting up the agenda. We're having our hearing examiners present their record of decisions, and as they speak in summarizing their record of decision, they're posting up an appropriate section of their recommended decision. So we're trying to be more transparent and assist those that tune in to follow the proceedings, because you know it can get a little monotonous. We are on YouTube, so if you just Google or search on NMPRC, you'll find our channel. You can also go to our website, and it has a link there to our meetings. And if any of you are ever curious about finding out about a certain case, you can access any documents, all orders, testimonies, any document associated with an active case through our e-docket. And so if it's on the main page, if you just scroll down, it's on the right-hand side. It's fascinating. I mean, your eyes may roll back after maybe, but if you're really focused and you want to find out like what's going on with the PNM Avangrid merger, boy, you can have at it. So I'm gonna close with just some facts about the PNM Avangrid merger. I know it's been in the media a lot. It's been in large full-page ads in the newspapers. But let me just preface my remarks to let you know that as a commissioner, I can't talk about any active cases that are pending or any cases that may come before the commission. And so what I'm going to share with you is it's public information. I can certainly talk about what has occurred, but I can't opine on what I think the outcome would be of the PNM Avangrid merger. I couldn't speculate in terms of whether the current or the pending stipulated agreement would be approved. So PNM is merging with a subsidiary of a Spanish global company. The Spanish company is called Iberdrola. And Avangrid right now has applied for the merger. It's an $8.3 billion merger. It is comprised of $4 billion in debts that Avangrid will pay and a $4.3 billion stock purchase. PNM applied for the merger in November of last year. There's quite a few parties. The way these cases are is you have interveners. Parties want to intervene. They want to weigh in on the final decision. I'm not going to go through the list. So an initial stipulation or an agreement has been filed, but it doesn't include all the parties. And I think many of you may have heard the hearing examiner called Avangrid and PNM in. He was very upset in that the PNM Avangrid folks had not disclosed some issues and sanctions and fines that some subsidiaries of Avangrid had to pay for poor service. Some of the other sanctions were for a lack of response in a weather emergency. And so the procedure right now has been set, and hearings are going to be held on the stipulation, a second stipulation has been filed that includes more parties. So the more parties that are included, the better it is. And typically these big mergers are typically settled in the form of a stipulated agreement. Now, in terms of the staff of the PRC, the way we reviewed it is the most recent merger that the PRC adjudicated, which was prior to my time, was the El Paso Electric JP Morgan merger. And so we're using that as, staff is using that as a comparison in terms of what staff would like to see in this merger in terms of job creation, economic development, all these things that will help you, the public. Obviously the deal's gonna help, it's gonna help investors with that stock purchase above market price. See, I gotta stay away from that because I'm kind of opining already. So I must tell you, in terms of the parties that have already signed on to the most recent stipulation, the Attorney General has signed on, and the Attorney General is the chief ratepayer advocate in the state of New Mexico. And I should say, if it were me, I would hold out. If I'm the chief public advocate, I would wait to see how this merger and each stipulated agreement may improve for the ratepayer. But the Attorney General is a party to the stipulation. If you want to intervene as an individual, you just can't do it. You have to get the permission from the Attorney General's office. That's how formal it is. So this is a complex case. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. In terms of the procedure, I want to let you know, write this date down, August 9th, 2021. That is the public hearing that's been scheduled to take public comment. But if you tune in, the hearing examiner is going to make an announcement. He's going to say, we're going to hear what all of you have to say, but it's not going to have any bearing on his decision. It's the evidentiary hearing and the evidence presented and testimony and cross and all that, that has bearing. And so, but you will get your opportunity to comment on this merger once you learn more about the details. There is no deadline for the commission to act on this, but our mandate simply is the public interest. And so we have a lot of latitude in what we can consider to be in the public interest. And the commission is not bound to accept any stipulation. But there's prominent language in that agreement that says, if any commissioner, when they act on it, if they deviate from this stipulation, it's completely null and void. And so it really, in a way, pressures the commission to adopt the stipulated agreement. And so with that, I'll take any questions. It doesn't have to be on the merger. It can be on any issues. Is that okay, Chris? Any questions for me? Sorry, I covered a lot of information for you, but any questions? Yes? Oh, just thumbs up. Thank you.
Oh, thumbs up on all that you covered. And I wondered if we could at least, I know you can't opine, but would maybe a show of hands of those of us who might be against that merger? Would you be interested in?
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean,
Constituency?
who's against the merger as it stands right now? Okay. But I do recommend you be informed because that stipulated agreement is very specific. There's many concessions that are made in that stipulated agreement, and this is gonna affect the state for years to come. There could be some potential upsides to this. This Spanish parent company has invested, lots of money in renewable energy. Hopefully they'll be willing to invest more in our grid. Our electric grid is quite antiquated, and we really need to improve our grid. So far, there's nothing in there regarding grid investment in the stipulated agreement, but it certainly is an issue facing the state. We already have certain parts of the grid, they're called feeder lines, that are at capacity. So for those who live in these areas that want to have rooftop solar like I have, you have to get an application to interconnect into the grid. But yet we have parts of the grid, these feeder lines that are at capacity, and we already have people that invested heavily in residential rooftop solar and can't interconnect. And so we have issues, folks. We have issues with our grid. Come on, any questions? Come on. Yes.
How are the stipulations enforced after, assuming this goes through?
Well, the stipulation is just a stipulation until the commission takes action. And so right now it's an agreement on paper. The hearing examiner, our hearing examiners are administrative judges. We use that to kind of streamline the adjudication process. And when they preside over a case, they develop a very formal, comprehensive recommended decision, and then they present it to the commission. And we're not bound to accept that. We can deviate from the recommended decision. We can make slight changes. We can reject it entirely. And so we have a lot of latitude as a commission in terms of how to address these recommended decisions. But the most versatile, talented, knowledgeable folks are our administrative judges. They're extremely experienced. I have the highest respect for them, and I'm really glad we use these administrative judges. Otherwise, I mean, if we, the commission, had to preside over these cases, oh my God, we never get anything done. So it's up to the commission. Yes? Pardon me? Will the rates go up? Well, I can tell you, in the stipulated agreement, they're offering a rate credit in there. So rates could go down initially, which is one of the concessions, in the stipulated agreement. So it's possible if that stays in there. Yes.
Yeah. So the Biden infrastructure plan has a lot of grid modernization. And the question, but the grid's privately owned, so how does all that work?
Well, the legislature passed a Grid Modernization Act, and they created a grant program to incentivize, certain owners, because there's different, owners to our grid. Tri-State owns some transmission lines. P&M is a vertically integrated utility, which means they manage everything from generation to distribution. They own, parts of our grid, but this Grid Modernization Act is meant to incentivize grid improvements, but the legislature hasn't capitalized the grant program yet. In terms of, we have a state agency that manages kind of the grid. Under the Martinez administration, they let it languish, and I think under the Lujan Grisham administration, she's really fully funded it. And so I think you'll see more state-sponsored transmission line improvements. Right now we're working on updating the interconnection manual, which provides guidance to utilities on how they can interconnect into the grid. The Energy and Minerals Department just, I think, concluded an astounding effort. They convened a working group that came up with a number of recommendations for grid modernization, and a lot of those activities are going to continue. But we have a long way to go. I mean, I think if I were to grade us on our progressive legislation, we're leading the country legislatively in our transition to clean energy. The ultimate goal is to achieve carbon-free energy by 2045. But if you look at our grid, if you look at our ability to implement it through the PRC, if you look at funding for grid improvements, we have a ways to go. So if people from out of the state, they're admiring us, but if they peel back the onion, they'll see that we have a lot of work that still needs to be done. Come on, yes?
How long would this agreement, this merger, if it goes through, I guess it's gonna go through, from what you're saying?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the latest stipulated agreement, and we're in version 2. When they have the hearings on this latest stipulated agreement, it could change, because it's gonna provide the opportunity for those organizations that still oppose it, like the Sierra Club is not on board, right? They're a major intervener. Sierra Club will have an opportunity to scrutinize and comment, on that stipulation. So it could change, but once we approve it as a commission, it's permanent.
Permanent forever.
Yes.
Oh, gosh. Wow, it's important.
Yes.
Has P&M or Bond or anybody put forward any kind of plan to deal with that transition to solar energy or to deal with the base loading problem that we have? Has anybody started to formalize that or put forward something, some kind of?
Yeah, the question is, what's P&M doing to make this transition? They're just sitting back to see how this merger fares. But what they are doing is they are working with us on, for example, updating this interconnection manual that dictates how new distributed energy interconnects with the grid. We're working on ushering in these advanced meters, these smart meters, which many states already have. What you could be seeing, if I were to predict the future, is that your rates are not going to be these block rates. You may have time of use rates where you as the ratepayer can monitor your energy use 24/7. And so we're a ways back in terms of common accepted industry technology like advanced metering technology. But so P&M, to answer your question, I mean, they're really not doing much right now. They're spending a lot on advertising. And by the way, those full page ads, that's a recoverable expense. The legal fees associated with the cases is a recoverable expense. Pardon me? Yep. Yes.
Have you talked to the officials in the state of Maine? I understand Avangrid has an interest there and they're very dissatisfied.
Yeah, this is an interesting development. Maine was a state that I believe sanctioned one of Avangrid's subsidiaries, and there's a legislative effort afoot by a particular legislator in Maine to basically create a public power in lieu of this subsidiary. So it's gaining a lot of traction. I hear that many folks in Maine are dissatisfied. I don't know the name of that company, but yeah, they want to go to public power, is as I understand it, this legislative effort.
Would that be a bad thing in Mexico, public power?
Well, as a former city councilor in Santa Fe, for example, we had attempted to build a community solar facility, and P&M said, we have to own it. Well, it's not community solar if you have to own it. And so we looked at other options. We determined that we could have our own municipal power on the parts of the city that are growing, but we still had to rely on P&M infrastructure, right, to wheel that power. And so either way, the owner of the infrastructure kind of dictates. Now, there is the option, we looked at eminent domain, right? Seizing it in the public interest and to pay fair market value, but eminent domain's a big deal, and it's not very popular, especially here in Sandoval County. Any other questions? I went way over my time, but I'm willing to chat with you after this session and answer all your questions. Yes?
Just to backtrack a little bit, you said that the
Brady Romero, and I am the current county clerk. And I'd like to thank you and the Democratic Party for really supporting me in my run for office. I have my chief deputy clerk, Joey Dominguez. Yay, Joey! Without him, he is instrumental in everything we've done. So just a little bit of information. This was our first election that we ran for CD1.
violent offenders. So gotten a lot done, still have a lot more to do to go. And I believe in signs, so I found this, I found a little heart. So I heart all of you and thank you very much for being here and for all that you do for the party. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's good to see everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. And I wanted to thank, I've seen some people come in the county and stop by the assessor's office, so I want to thank you guys. If you guys need anything at all, my name's Linda Gallegos, and I just want to say, of course, I see Sue here. Where's Miss Sue?
A little bit about what's going on in the county. One of the things that we have done, fairly recently is a temporary shelter on the administrative grounds. And many of you who've come to vote or come for a vaccine may have seen these a small number of kennels and a little yard. Well, that's step one for Sandoval County becoming the home of a regional animal shelter. And you know the background on why and how this is coming about. It's partly due to the tremendous need that we have across the region. Both Santa Fe and Albuquerque Humane are so full that they cannot take the animals that we have that need to be placed. So we have a limited hold period, obviously, because it is considered temporary. And these guys need fosters, so if you know anybody that would be willing to foster in the county, please let us know. Our key contact there, and you'll find all the information on the Sandoval County website, is our Community Service Director, Ann Ryan. She's taken a huge role and lead in this process, and we are very, very optimistic about how this regional shelter will work for all of us, including being an economic driver. We're hoping, because the state of New Mexico does not have a veterinary school, that we'll be able to minimally intern some of those kids that go off to Colorado or wherever to get their schooling.